Name is Michael Jocks. This program is going to be a presentation will be about the moral decay over the last 60 years, its ties to secular humanism, and what you can do about it, well, how you can fight back. That's the goal, is to try to encourage people to get involved and do something to take on these issues. So I want to start out with the moral decay, and probably the best way to start that off is with some of these charts where you can see what has been going on over the last number of years. We have sexually transmitted diseases going up by over 300%, and starting around 1963 is when this seems to be going up on a repeated basis. We see sexually transmitted diseases overall going up by over 300%. Unwed girls 15 to 19 years of age, we've got over a 400% increase. We've got premarital sex going up among all age groups. I don't have that marked off as the exact increase. Under 15 to 19 is more than a 200% increase. All this starts out around 1963 is when the trend starts going up. Single parent households, 300% increase going up from 1963 on. Unmarried couples living together, a 500% increase. No control, let's see, premarital sex and adultery, that type of thing. We have a 45 to 55% of the women and 50 to 65% of the women. This is a 200 to 300% increase. And I make note here, no control before marriage. Why should there be any control after marriage? The divorce rate, 250% increase. And again, 1963 or so seems to be about the dividing line. Violent crime, 1,000% increase. SAT scores back when they, right now you can no longer compare them anymore because they've been changed. But when you could still compare them, you can see how high they were up prior to the 1960s. And look how they just fell going down into the 70s. And then they began to change the SATs so that you could no longer track it as far as the dropout. Percentage of births to unwed mothers. This is something need to really pay a close attention to. This is over 1,000% increase. Back in the 1940s, we only had about 3.5% of the babies born out of wedlock, and even up until 1960, it increased up to about 5%. So from 3.5 to 5%, and gradually with each passing decade, we kept on increasing to where today it's over 42% of the babies are born out of wedlock. That's a significant number. Now bear this in mind when they turn around and say, well, we need to teach safe sex in our government schools because abstinence doesn't work. And the proof for abstinence doesn't work. We've been teaching abstinence separately in some schools for the past 10 years, been funded by federal government for the past 10 to 15 years, and we don't see any advantage there. And we have abstinence education included with their contraceptive safe sex education. Therefore, abstinence doesn't work, and that's the reason why we're so high up. I'm sorry, when you introduce the sex education that they teach today, this is part of the reason why we've gone up like this, is the type of sex education that's being given. And if you stop and consider, even if they teach abstinence with the contraceptive education, that's double talk. You cannot turn around and teach abstinence in one side of your mouth, and on the other side of your mouth, you're spitting out the safe sex message and saying, go for it. And it's like a wink and a nod. It's a bogus argument saying it. So the government schools and what they've been doing for the past 30, 40 years is a significant reason for this. Also, changes in law in relationship to contraception, which I'd like to get into a little bit, contributed majorly to that problem. Growth of out of wedlock pregnancy from 1921 to 2010. All these charts show basically the same thing. In the United States, 71% of the poor families and children are not married. The #1 indicator of poverty is single parenthood. Single parents raising children by themselves. That's the #1 indicator of poverty in this country. We wouldn't need welfare if it wasn't for the fact that we've got all these unwedlock pregnancies and all these moms raising the kids by themselves. This is a major problem. And government, by the way, through its laws and everything else, is doing everything it can over the last 40, 50 years to undermine the family. The growth in childhood, this is based on blacks versus Hispanics versus whites. The blacks are in worse shape than the whites for unwed pregnancies, but they began working on the black community a whole lot sooner than the white community with the sex education and Title X entitlements and everything else that came about. I'm going to go beyond this one now and skip this one. This is titled, before I go, before I go on to a different topic, what do you think was the cause from 1960? Because does anybody have any idea what happened in 1963 that began the change that was going on? Yeah.
Bill?
Huh?
The contraceptive bill?
No.
They took God out of,
They took God out of the government schools back in 1963. That was one of the major things that they did. So in 1963, they banned prayer out of the government schools. In 1980s, they took the Ten Commandments out of the government schools. In 1990s, they took graduation prayer out of the government schools. I graduated in 1969, so that gives you kind of what the age I am, from West Dallas Central High School. And back then, as part of our graduation thing, we had a prayer service. We had a Catholic priest, we had a Protestant minister, and we had a Jewish rabbi for a prayer service at our graduation. Today, that's illegal based on Supreme Court rule. By the way, the Supreme Court is making all these rules, not the government. Getting into the fallacy of so-called separation of church and state is a whole nother story that I could spend another hour on talking about how separation of church and state is really an oxymoron. It's a complete lie. It's not true. It's not what our Constitution states. But that's another topic. What do you think is the #1 religion in the world right now? The most dominant #1 religion in the world right now? Anybody have any clue? Huh?
Catholicism.
No, it's not the most dominant religion in the world anymore today.
As far as dominance, as far as what, politically? Or
Politically, educational-wise,
secular humanism.
secular humanism would be the most dominant religion. If you look at what's been going on over the last 40, 50 years, secular humanism, our laws used to be based on the Judeo-Christian principle. Today, our laws are being based on the humanistic school of thought. On the secular humanism. Our laws are all being changed to be based on secular humanism. And our educational philosophy by government is all based on secular humanism. I want to turn around and prove that. Secular humanism, socialism and humanism will always cause economic and moral bankruptcy. Humanist Manifesto 1 and Manifesto number 2. I believe Humanist Manifesto 1 was written in 1930s and Humanist Manifesto number 2 is written around 1973 or so. The first Humanist Manifesto, I believe, was signed by John Dewey. We had a junior high named after John Dewey in West Dallas. It used to be John Dewey Junior High School in West Dallas. And he was a major promoter of secular humanism, and it was part of his educational philosophy and his progressive education, which most of American education is based on today. Humanism is a philosophical, religious, and moral point of view as old as human civilization itself. It has as its roots classical China, Greece, Rome, and expressed in the Renaissance and in the Enlightenment in the scientific revolution in the 20th century. Humanism and socialism are two interlocking philosophical worldviews, having gradually replaced the founder's self-evident truth with lies designed to deceive and enslave the masses. The lies of humanism started in earnest after the so-called monkey trials of 1925, which replaced the teaching of creation and the theory of evolution. And by the way, that was another thing that occurred around 1963, was back then Russia was first to launch a satellite into space. And so we were behind in scientifically and in the space thing. And at that point, they started to promote science in the classroom, and a lot of government money went into it. And at that point, evolution became a major focus in teaching in biologies in the early 1960s based on government funding and government promotion. This erroneous theory was taught as a fact and became the springboard upon which the lies of humanism were based. If people can be convinced that there was no creation, it necessarily follows that there is no creator God, no sacred or inalienable right to life, liberty, or property, no divine purpose for mankind, no life after death or judgment day. It then becomes much easier to promote situational ethics, no absolute right or wrong. The ends justify the means. Abortion, euthanasia, the right to suicide, homosexuality, and any other variety of sexual exploration. The common good over individual rights. The erroneous notion that the environment and lower animals are more important than the human beings. Did you hug your tree today? Yeah. One world government under socialism. All socialists, humanists, and liberals and most Democrats hate God because they want to play God themselves. They play God with life issues by promoting abortion, euthanasia. They play God with property issues by taking from one and giving to another, socialism. They play God with liberty and the issues by forcing us to work many hours to pay for their socialist programs. See what the humanists are promoting. Below is a copy of the Humanist Manifesto 1 written in 1933 and Humanist Manifesto number 2 written in 1973. My comments are italicized and added emphasis are bold. Secular humanism is now the predominant worldview, surpassing Christianity in government and education, in media, our mainstream media. Many Christians themselves have, because they're all go through the same government school system, all get the same media off of TV, NBC, ABC, CBS. The news outlets are all basically the same and all have basically the same mindset. Many Christians themselves, many Catholics themselves have bought into X number of these secular humanist schools of thought. This is the driving philosophy behind abortion, euthanasia, fornication, the gay marriage. Its theology is atheism. Its philosophy is naturalism. We all got here by time and chance. Ethics is relativism. Psychology is self-actualization. Sociology is the non-traditional family. Law is based on man-made laws. Economics is socialism. We are convinced the time has passed for theism and deism, modernism, and several varieties for new thought. The distinction between the sacred and secular can no longer be maintained. Religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing, not created. That's the basis for their evolutionary school of thought, no God. Humanism believes that man is part of nature and that he's emerged as a result of a continuous process. Third, holding an organic view of life, humanists find that the traditional dualism of mind and body must be rejected. Humanism recognizes that man's religious culture civilization, clearly depicted by anthropology, of gradual development. Religious humanism maintains that all associations exist for the fulfillment of human life. The goal of humanism is a free universal society which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. We find insufficient evidence for a belief in the existence of the supernatural as either meaningless or irrelevant to the question of survival and fulfillment of the human race. No deity will save us. We must save ourselves. There is no credible evidence that life survives death of the body. In other words, no judgment day. Ethics is autonomous and situational. In other words, we promote situational ethics, no right or wrong, needing no theological or ideological sanctions. This is the belief system, and I'm going to show you how prevalent that is in just a few minutes. The right to birth control, abortion, divorce, and divorce should be recognized, while we do not approve of exploitative, denigrating forms of sexual expression. The many varieties of sexual exploration should not in themselves be considered evil. Individuals should be permitted to express their sexual proclivities and pursue their lifestyles as they desire. In other words, promote homosexuality and all sorts of sexual proclivities. This is another little comparison. Secular humanism, Marxism, and biblical Christianity. For humanism, theology is atheism versus Bible and Christianity and theism. The philosophy is naturalism versus supernaturalism. Its ethics are ethical relativism versus ethical absolutes underneath Christianity, or the Judeo-Christian system. Its biology is Darwinian evolution versus social creationism. Its psychology is monotheistic self-actualization versus dualism, dualism being God and man. Its sociology is non-traditional world-state ethical society versus home, church, and state underneath the biblical worldview. Its law is positive law, meaning man-made law, man law, versus biblical and natural law. Its politics are world government versus justice, freedom, and order. Its economics is socialism versus stewardship of property. Its history is historical evolution versus historical resurrection. I'll take you through this document. This document is interesting. Back in 1963, and when I first heard about this, there was 45 goals that were published that made a matter of congressional record of the Communist Party. And if you go through the goals, a number of them, you'll see how that's exactly what's been going on. This is published as made a matter of congressional record. You can turn around, go down to the public library and get the congressional records down there. And I found this document in there and photocopied it then at that point. And then I put it back into my files and highlighted it, I should say. At any rate, these are some goals that were very interesting. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and violation. This is from 1963, and this is exactly what we've seen over the last 50 years, for 40 years. Break down the cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity. Present homosexuality and degeneracy and promiscuity as normal and natural and healthy. This is from 1963, and this did not start occurring until around the 1990s to early 2000s. Infiltrate the churches and replace them with revealed religion versus social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that it violates the principles of separation of church and state. This did not occur until 1963. Up until that point, we had prayer in the government schools. And by the way, the whole First Amendment is written to the federal government, to Congress, not to the states. And so the Supreme Court interfered with the rights of the states as far as their schools went in this area, and did not pay attention to what the Constitution actually says. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate and old-fashioned. And there are a number of people trying to call for a CONCON today, a constitutional convention, which would essentially rewrite our entire Constitution if they get it instituted. Discredit the American Founding Fathers, present them as selfish aristocrats. Discourage the teaching of American history on the grounds that it was only a minor part of the big picture. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs. So our government has ballooned with all these social programs galore with the federal government and the state government both. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions. The National Educational Association Union for the Teachers is probably the most radical secular humanist organization out there promoting that in our schools. Transfer power and arrest police social agencies. Discredit family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Easy divorce became real good with the passing of no-fault divorce back in I believe it was in the 90s and 80s when no-fault divorce began to be pushed. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of their parents. Of course, if you're a Christian educator or a homeschooler, that becomes important to push on that issue. Internationalize the Panama Canal. Do you know when they internationalized the Panama Canal? I think Jimmy Carter back in 1978. But this was all laid down as a set of goals back in before 1960, published as a matter of congressional record back in 1963. I want to read you an essay that was published in the West Dallas Enterprise back in 1993. After we pulled out stuff out of the West Dallas School District. His letter is very enlightening and very pointed as far as telling you what's going on and trying to get the point across to the people. But very few people probably paid any attention. I would like to address this letter to all of you parents who have 4th, 5th, and 6th grader students in the West Dallas, West Milwaukee Public School District. This could be written to anybody in any school district because what went on back in that time is going on in all schools across the country. If you teach your children that it's wrong to steal, wrong to lie, wrong to cheat, I would challenge you to invite me into your home so that I can systematically disrupt that kind of moral teaching. I would ask your children if they could come up with times when it would be appropriate to lie, cheat, or steal. I would ask them if they thought it was right to have anyone impose their values on them. I would imply that there might be some good things about cheating. I would ask them if there was no such things as grades. Would their attitude toward cheating change? The assumption, of course, is that their attitude about cheating is that it is okay. Then I would start teaching your children how to make decisions based not on what is right and wrong, but on positive and negative consequences. I would teach them that there might be that what might be wrong for one may not be wrong for another. Believe me, when I get through with your children, they're going to be so confused that they will have a difficult time ever passing your values on to them again without them questioning you. So now that you know what I plan to do I have any takers? Will you let me mess with your child's head? Will you invite me in? If not, I would strongly suggest that you contact your child's teacher and ask him or her if a guidance counselor or a child psychologist will be coming into the classroom to do the same things that you won't let me do. I ask your teacher if there's a child being taught, if your child is being taught something called peaceful conflict resolution, where it doesn't matter what right and wrong is, just what feels good. And ask the teacher if when they discuss citizenship, if they're going to ask your child about his attitude about cheating, lying, and stealing. Then ask for the copy of all the material that will be used in these classes. It will blow your mind. Your child's teacher and principal may have your best child's interest at heart, but something is very rotten taking place right under our noses, and it's starting to smell like a rat. Good luck, Gerald. What he's talking about, this program that we pulled out back in 1993. Now, mind you, this is a specific program at this specific time, but this type of stuff is used all over the place. Just varying ways of turning around and doing it, and it never gets eliminated, based on everything I've seen so far. And I've gone through this when I was teaching religious ed class here a few years ago, explaining this to the kids on how this stuff works. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this. But at any rate, this particular program was how to solve conflicts with peers. Their own kids would be helping each other solve problems or conflicts on the playground or wherever. And these are for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. So bear that in mind with what I'm talking about. Identify the problem. Describe the possible choices. Positive and negative consequences. Act on your choice and learn from your choice. That's what you're supposed to do. Well, they had about 60 pages of situational ethics, no right or wrong answers to any of this stuff. Of those 60 pages, there are probably about 5 or 10 that are just rotten to the core. And I don't have time to go through every one of these, so I'm going to pick and choose. This one is an easy one to explain and was the most self-explanatory as far as how this went about. You're buying this boat that's for sale. You and your friends decide to buy the boat together, and the other 2 boys have the money. You're $10 short. You go to your father's grocery store and he asks you to tend to the counter. Rich old Mr. Kelly, one of your dad's best customers, he enters the store. Mr. Kelly's eyesight's are beginning to fail him, and he pays, the bill is $9.53, but he pays you a $20 bill. He doesn't realize he's giving you a 20 instead of a 10. Mr. Kelly makes a mistake and gives you 20. You can keep that extra $10 and buy that boat you want. Mr. Kelly believes he's only giving you $10. Your dad's not losing any money. What is your decision? Explain your decision. Identify the problem. What are the possible consequences if you keep the money? Describe the possibilities. Would you feel guilty enjoying the boat? What happens if Mr. Kelly finds out that he gave you a 20 instead of a 10? Shouldn't Mr. Kelly share his wealth anyways? Does he really have a right to so much money when all you want is a little old rowboat? And act out the plan. Learn from the future. What would you do differently if this happened? Money counter is another one. I'm not going to go through this one, but they're very similar in how they work. It's all based on a situational ethic, which is, again, goes back to secular humanism. I want to deal with this one because part of the program in this one, I had gone. Let me first tell you a story. When this was being used, and I found out about it, I was not your typical parent back then when my kids were in school. If I saw something was going on and I got wind of it and the red flag went up and this was a red flag that went up, I would march down to go see the teacher, the principal, or superintendent. I didn't have a problem walking in the door and demanding to have the material put in my hand and walk home with it and go through it all. And so I was literally a thorn in the West Dallas School District for about 15 years. They did not like me very well because I created nothing but trouble. But at any rate, I got a hold of this program, and then I'd call up my son's teacher, who I knew was one of the workers on this program, and he was in 5th grade, and I had a meeting with her. And I'm not sure. Usually, I tell people what I think very directly and bluntly. In this case, I decided to play dumb because I wanted to confirm everything I had been taught on how this stuff works. And I have been taught that it's all work designed to teach that there's a more relativist world review, there's no right or wrong answer, etc. So I asked my son's teacher, I says, you know, I've been going through this manual and you got 60 pages of situational ethics. There's no right or wrong in any of these situations. I says, it really bothers me that there's no right or wrong answers to this stuff. And his teacher says to me, he says, well, Mr. Jocks, would you want to impose your moral values on everyone else? Well, as soon as she did that to me, based on everything I had read already, I knew what she was doing. I knew if I said yes, she was going to say, well, who do you think you are? Just sit there and think that you can impose your values on someone else or on the whole school district or whatever. And if I said no, she's off the hook. And I wasn't going to let her off the hook. So I said, no, I don't think I need to do that. But on the other hand, I don't think it's your right to be propagating to all these kids in your classroom that moral right and wrong is a matter of opinion. You're in my position at the home to be able to direct the upbringing of my child and be able to teach them that there is a right and wrong. And then I swear to the teachers when they don't have an answer to come back to you, that they're trained to give the standard answer is, well, I'm sorry you feel this way, Mr. Jocks, but that's just your opinion. Now, mind you, after I taught her, I also had put another call into another teacher at Lincoln Grade School because I was trying to establish contact with somebody. And this one was at Jefferson where I taught to this teacher. And the Lincoln Grade School teacher finally called me back and she wanted to know what I wanted or was willing to help me. I said, I already found out what I needed to know. But she was persistent and she wanted to know what it was that I was after. She says, well, I was kind enough to give you a call back. At least you could tell me what it was that you were looking for. And I thought, okay, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to take a different tack with her because I want to deal with another part of the program. Another part of the program was when they were having the peers or training the peers to be able to solve conflicts. And the question is, should peers even be solving conflicts for each other? It really belongs to the teachers. It really belongs to the adults. But one of the things they wanted was the students to come away with solving it with a win-win situation. They wanted both parties of the conflict to come away as winners. That was the ideal situation. They did not want a lose-lose situation type of thing. That was off the table. And so I says to her, I says, you know, this sounds real nice on paper, this win-win situation versus a lose-lose situation. But I says, it really bothers me. I'm kind of a bottom-line person. I says, explain something to me. If little Johnny takes the ball away from another child at the playground, you're not going to make little Johnny give that ball back to them and apologize for taking that ball away? And she said to me, well, that'd be up to them to decide among themselves. Now, this is a teacher who's teaching the government schools that my children right and wrong or whatever, and this is up to them to decide whether or not there's something right or wrong here. And, well, that was the wrong answer for me. And I hit the ceiling and I says, listen, I says, the only thing a child ever understands or a bully ever understands is to be challenged and confronted right then and there on the spot. And she says, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. Jocks, but that's just your opinion. Now, these are educated people. These are people, though, trained in the humanistic school of thought. This was being used in the 8th grade around the year 1999 to 2000. Describe an incident when you felt real angry with your parent. This is being used at West Milwaukee Middle School at the time in an English class. Did you think your other family members were on your side? Why or why not? Have you ever wished some other person you met was your mom or dad? Tough to put wedges between the child and his or her parents. Citizenship education. This is being used with guidance counselors coming into the classroom at the time for 4th through 6th grade. And some of the worst stuff was underneath citizenship education. Cheating. What's your attitude toward cheating? Cheating is blank. People who cheat blank. If I were caught cheating, blank. Grades are blank. My parents think grades are blank. If I ever flunked an exam, I'd feel blank. The bad thing about cheating is, the good thing about cheating is, how would you feel if you found out your doctor had cheated on a college exam, on a college English exam or a college physiology exam? Well, let me play the devil's advocate here with the doctor cheating on an English exam versus a physiology exam. Yeah, we certainly wouldn't want the doctor cheating at a physiology exam because that would mean he's incompetent. But if he needed to cheat on an English exam so he had enough time to study for his physiology exam, that might be a good thing. Is it ever okay to cheat? When? Let me blow that up. Can you see that all back there? Is it okay to cheat? When? Lying. Has anyone ever told you the truth so painfully you wish they had told you a lie instead? Do you think your elected officials lie? Yes. The rulers the rulers of the state may be allowed to lie for the good of the state. Is that okay? They have ways of turning around and making it look like lies. Lying at times may be okay. I want to skip through some of this stuff because I don't have enough time to cover everything. I want to come back to this. I want to explain something. One of the most common type of situational ethics that's used in most every single program is when they, a good example is the lifeboat experience. You got 10 people in a lifeboat, but you only have enough room for 8. And they give you a list of characters of who you're going to throw out because you only have room for 8. Which ones are you going to throw out? You got a minister, you got a Jewish rabbi, you got an 80-year-old man, a baby, a criminal who has killed someone already, but he can catch all the fish he needs, so you're going to have enough food to eat. That type of thing. So which 2 people are you going to dump out of the rowboat? Well, when I first learned about why this is so wrong, it was from Peg Luxick. I don't know anybody has ever heard of her, but she was dynamite, and she's very much involved with who controls the children and OBE, outcome-based education. She explained the lifeboat. She says, I was getting this when I was going for my master's degree, and she said, I was a ringer sitting in the class. I knew what the professor was doing. And she says, the situational ethics and everything, they put you in a box with a set of parameters. They make you think you're making your own decision when in fact you're not. They've laid this box out. And so they said, who are you going to throw out your life, throw out of the boat? And so that's where your focus is. You're going down that road. What would have happened if you would have turned around and changed around to find a way to save everybody? Instead, find a way to save everybody instead of who you're going to throw out. And she says, we could turn around and throw everything we don't need off the boat. We can turn around and get rid of all of our clothes because at this point nudity isn't real important in comparison to saving lives. We can throw the boat up. We can turn around, throw a rope out and back, take turns swimming. We can turn around and throw the boat upside down because the boat's a whole lot more buoyant, and hang off the side and put the baby up on top of the boat. She says, there's a number of different ways you could turn around and come up with trying to save everybody. If that had only been framed that way. But instead they said, who are you going to throw out of the rowboat? And so what she's trying to explain is, in order to be able to beat this thing, you have to take it outside of the box they framed it in. Take it outside of the box so that they can't pin you into that box. And she says, so I presented all that, and the professor, he got a little bit mad because she just destroyed his whole scenario. And he says, well, there's a shark in the water. She said, fine, and there's a shark in the back of the boat. So one of the things, and so I want to go back to this one here. My daughter was taking, when she was in high school, was taking a creative writing class, and this teacher was using what was called the Book of Questions in her classroom. And I knew at that point that teacher was breaking the rules because that book was not approved curriculum. And I tried to convince the teacher in a roundabout way without telling her I knew what was going on at conference time, 2 different conference times, what I thought about situational ethics and values clarification, how bad it was. So I was hoping she was going to take it out. but she persisted and she used the book throughout the whole entire year. And there are a number of questions that she asked that were used from the book that were completely off the wall. And this is one of them, and I want to use this one as an explanation for what's going on. You and your closest friend, your father, on this vacation together, hiking in a remote jungle. Your two companions stumble into a nest of poisonous vipers and are bitten repeatedly. You know neither will live without an immediate shot of antivenom, yet there's only one single dose of antivenom, and it is in your pocket. What will you do? Whose life are you going to save, your dad or your closest friend? Now, I swear all these lifeboat or life-type experiences, these life-death experiences, and choosing life versus another, this is the way to turn around and focus their heads on the idea that some life is worth living and some life is not. Therefore, they're going to accept the whole idea of abortion a whole lot easier and the whole idea of euthanasia a whole lot easier. Now, I saw my daughter's answer because she had to put it all in writing to all these questions. So I knew what she answered, and she said, I should give the antivenom to my dad. And I was glad. It made me feel good that she did that, but it was the wrong answer. And I would explain this to all my students in the religious ed classes, that this is the wrong answer. And I would see my students year after year, their jaws would drop, not understanding why it was the wrong answer. Huh? What are you talking about? Wrong answer. I said she needed to find a way to save both people, not whose life you're going to save. She needed to find a way to save both people. And I will ask the class after I explain lifeboat, how could she found a way to save both people? What could she have done differently? And usually there's one or two kids who'd figure it out. Does anybody tell me how could she have saved both lives? What could she have done differently to save both lives?
Possibly suck the venom out of the bite.
Well, that'd be one thing that you're going to do. You could have the parties suck each other's venom out of the bite. What else could she do? Give half a dose to each one, and each of the other ones are sucking the venom out, and that gives, she buys the extra time with the half a dose to go get some extra help. And now she's just taken outside of the box and just ruined it. I would explain how all this stuff works and how you need to take it outside of the box, and just to give you an idea as far as how this works. And yes, it's a nice thing to see, but this is something that needs to be done. This is something that needs to be done for all kids who are in government school, to explain how this stuff works so that they know some of this stuff. But I would have students turn around and acknowledge me over the 12 years that I was teaching here, that yes, they did that to us in our school, or yes, they did it in my school. And some kids have bought into the situational ethics type stuff, some of the kids had. But one of my students came back, it was like my third last class or something like that, came back the following school year, and came back to me in class, the religion class. He says, Mr. Jocks, I was thinking about you the other day. I got to tell you. He says, I'm taking AP Psych, advanced placement psychology, and he was at Whitnall High School at the time. And he says, he started using the situational ethics in the classroom. He says, I remember what you taught us. And he says, I began thinking outside of the class, outside of the box. And he says, pretty soon the other kids figured out what I was doing. And they all chimed in. They all helped out. We took every one of the scenarios apart. I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall to watch this all unfold. It was nice. It was sweet. But that's what needs to be done, and that's what needs to happen. That was just about 3-4 years ago when he came back to me. So I know that this stuff is still being used. It's out there. It's been being used since the 1970s to 1960s. But of course, they took God out, and they have to replace him with something else. Nature abhors a vacuum. And what they've replaced it with is the secular humanist school of thought, over and over in every single area. I want to bring this one up. West Allis School is probably the only school district that has a choice in their sex education in their 10th grade health class in the whole state of Wisconsin. This was done back in around 2001. It was almost killed off about 3 or 4 years ago when Doyle passed a ban banning all absence-centered education. But we had a choice where they could take the regular comprehensive health class or the advanced health class. It's back up online since Walker repealed the ban But I just want to go through a little bit about a little of this so that you understand what the difference is and how it works. Comprehensive sex education. This is a comprehensive absence-based. Call it absence-based because there's some absence in the message, but it's really just lip service. Absence. When you look at it, when you look over the material, it's absence is the best choice versus any other contraceptive method, because absence is the only 100% effective method. But of course, we can. But if you look at the teacher's notes, the condoms with spermicides can be 97% effective. So why be abstinence then, if they're going to teach that? Human growth development. While abstinence is promoted as preferred choice, the following is included in pre-production system contraception, options after pregnancy, confidentiality laws. So they teach them where to get all the reproductive services and everything else, including abortion and the contraceptives and being tested for venereal disease. And they learn that through the confidentiality laws that they're all protected from their parents don't need to know a thing about it, because the state law will not allow anybody to turn around and tell the parents where they're going and what they're doing. And that's part of Title 10, where it's absolutely mandatory from the federal government. Versus an absence-centered program as a healthful choice. This is the comprehensive absence program, in which all discussion is centered around absence is the only accepted healthy choice for teens before marriage. It will focus in depth on the character development and the social, emotional, psychological, and physical benefits of practicing abstinence. So you can see that there's a world of difference between these and their emphasis. Tolerance for sexual preferences, this goes to the gay lifestyle. This was all put into effect back in 2001. Today, the West Dallas School District now has gay, lesbian, straight alliance clubs on both West Dallas Central High School and West Dallas Hill High School. And the gay, straight alliances are on about, I think it's about 25 to 30% of government school campuses in the state of Wisconsin today, and it's growing. They focus on contraceptive methods versus the absence focuses on how contraception will eventually fail them. It's going to fail no matter how you look at it. That's the reason why you got all these high out of wedlock pregnancies and the skyrocketing abortion rates in this country. Which is another thing, unless you teach chastity, unless you teach why chastity is important, why it's important to protect the marital bed, you're never going to overcome abortion. Never will it happen. Can't happen. Establishing boundaries, levels of intimacy, teach them how in the comprehensive sex education, not included in the abstinence program. And then the anatomy and physiology, that's not included in this one, in part because they teach this year after year after year, starting in about 5th grade. Sometimes it goes down to 4th grade. So why do you need to cover this topic over and over and over? This is Biology 101. We needed to make room to have the room to teach the abstinence program, so we took it out of there for the 10th grade to give them enough time to be able to spend a few hours, a few class periods on the abstinence message. Now mind you, this is a required course, health class is, and you have about 350 to 400 kids at Central in their sophomore year, and the same thing at Hale, and you only had about 20 to 35 kids taking the comprehensive abstinence class versus everybody else is taking the other one. And the other thing that's going on out there, I went around a number of years ago to churches asking for help, and about 50% of the Catholics and 50% of the Protestant churches said forget it, they would not help at all. And I had one Protestant minister tell me, well, if you're going to turn around and teach abstinence and not the contraceptive message, you realize that you're promoting abortion? That's the mindset that's out there among the ministers, and you don't have the, and the other thing is, those churches that did say to help, all of them did it within close circles. In other words, just with the families who were in the religious education, were that age group. None of them took it out to explain to all of the people in the pews through bulletin notices or whatever, or letters to every family what was going on in the schools. Most of your parents don't know what's going on and don't pay attention to what's going on, and the churches have a major failure here, which is part of the reason why we're going the direction we're going, is the lack of preaching from the pulpit, the lack of catechesis on the stuff in the religious education programs, and we don't have ministers willing to turn on, stand up and do the right thing and teach on all these social culture issues. It just isn't happening. And if it doesn't happen, it's the reason why you have X number of parents buying into all this stuff. And no doubt, those that with only 30 kids out of 350 taking the class, and the majority taking it, you got to figure half of them are Christian, at least, and they're buying into the secular humanistic school of thought, and they don't have a problem. And that's because we're not teaching what's wrong from the pulpit. You got a question, or I thought you were raising your hand. I'm sorry. I want to show one more thing here. This was something put out during from Germany. I want this one too. Humanist Charles Potter writes, education is thus the most powerful ally of humanism. Every American school is a school of humanism. What can a theistic give Sunday school, meeting for an hour once a week, teaching only a fraction of the children do to stem the tide of a 5-day teaching program on humanistic teaching? Charles F. Potter, Humanism, the New Religion, 1930. Nimpler, a German pastor, theologian, born in Lipson, Germany, in response to Nazi Germany and Hitler. First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists. I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Christian. I did not speak out because I was not a Christian. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. When Hitler stayed in Elberg, Germany, when an opponent declares, I will not come over to your side, you will not get me on your side, I calmly say, your child belongs to me already. A people lives forever. What are you? You will pass on. Your descendants, however, will now stand in a new camp. In a short time, they will know nothing else than this new community. And that had to do with the school system. Christianity has fought and still fights and will fight science to the desperate end over evolution, because evolution destroys utterly and finally the reason for Jesus' earthly existence. Suppose he was made necessary. Destroy Adam and Eve in original sin, and in the rubble you will find the sorry remains of the Son of God. Take away the meaning of his death. If Jesus was not the Redeemer who died for our sins, and that is what evolution means, then Christianity is nothing. Richard G. Bosworth, The Meaning of Evolution, American Atheist, in February of 1978. In January, February of 1983, the issue of Humanist magazine, John Duffy proclaimed his award-winning essay, "The battle for humankind's future must be waged in one in the public school classroom between the rotting corpses of Christianity and the new faith of humanism. Humanism will emerge triumphant." There are loaded comments with all these secular humanists as far as what's going on. Most public never read what's happening out there. April 1978, President Jimmy Carter sends a telegram to the American Humanist Association. And by the way, does everybody remember Jimmy Carter is a supposed evangelical Protestant Christian? Well, he sent this to the American Humanist Association. Those who participate in the annual meeting of the American Humanist Association are furthering the movement that greatly enhances our way of life. The work of your organization in this area is therefore especially gratifying to me, and I welcome this opportunity to applaud you in important accomplishments. Walter Mondale, brother, Vice President Walter Mondale, declares humanists believe the traditional theism, especially the faith and prayer, assumed to love and to hear and understand prayers, be able to do something, is unproved and outmoded faith. No deity will save us. That was Walter Mondale's brother who stated that. Let no one who hates religion falsely think that we can do without religion or that it can be banished from the earth. That is the false assumption under which modern pagans work. Choice is not between religion and no religion, but between two religions, the religion from God or the religion of the state. Archbishop Fulton Sheen. Unless our people are thoroughly instructed in the great truths, they are not fitted to understand our institutions or to provide for them. U.S. President Calvin Coolidge. In the 1940s, U.S. bishops were virtually unanimous in sounding the alarm about the dangers of state-run education. A towering figure in the Catholic Church during the late 19th century and early 20th century was Cardinal James Gibbons. For instance, in a pastoral letter in 1919 to the U.S. bishops, he wrote the following: "The spirit of our people in general is averse to a state monopoly, and this obvious reason that such an absorption of control would mean the end of freedom and initiative. The same consequences are sure to follow when the state attempts to monopolize education, and the disaster will be much greater in so much that it will affect not simply the worldly interests of citizenship, but also the spiritual growth and salvation. Here's the good cardinal saying, not only economic and political interests will be at stake with education, government education, but the salvation of souls would be adversely affected. In other words, public education will at some point prove to be the nemesis to the mission of the church, and indeed it has. And that was back in 1919. That was when the bishops knew what was going on, were far more involved, and we had people were rock solid Catholics back then. And now we have an absence going on here as far as what's going on. I want to take you to the YouTube page. If you type in this up in Google, Love Life Library, it's supposed to be Connect the Dots. The dots, Michael Jock's YouTube, you will get this, usually will pop up first on the list, and that'll take you to this YouTube page. And it's worthwhile going through. It's worthwhile taking some time to go through it. But I've got people up here who are doing some marvelous work. How many people know who Archbishop Corleone is? Anybody know who Archbishop Corleone is? One person? Anybody else? Two people know who Archbishop Corleone. Archbishop Corleone, back about 10, 12 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark area, was Bishop of Oakland at the time out in California, and he was a major instrument of the case in implementing Proposition 8 out in California to ban gay marriage and to make marriage one man, one woman in California until it was shot down by the courts. He played a major role in that, and he's still very much involved in it. And he's speaking out on those issues. He's got his own webpage trying to promote marriage, and he's been put up top of the command by the USC bishops in this area as far as dealing with this. The next person, this is a homily, or pardon me, a letter that was given verbally and was also sent out. It was sent out to every single parishioner in this man's diocese, including his priests. So every parishioner received this on the destructive nature of contraception and why contraception is wrong within the bonds of marriage. Bishop James Conley, does anybody know what diocese he's from? Nobody? Does anybody know who Bishop Fabian Bruskowitz is? Lincoln, Nebraska? Well, Bishop James Conley took over for Bishop Bruskowitz after he retired. And this bishop just put out a letter explaining why contraception was wrong to every one of his parishioners in his whole diocese. I don't think I've ever heard of any bishop doing that before. No other bishop has done, but that's something that ought to be done by every bishop out there, across the whole country, across the whole globe, and it ain't happening. Anybody know who Father Nathan Reisman is? Oh, we got a couple people who know him. Hey, he's out of our diocese. He's in West Bend. This particular piece, he gave a presentation, an hour and 40 minutes, on explaining from natural law why homosexuality is wrong. Does a marvelous job. This piece is on chastity and contraception laws, how they changed back in the 1960s. I need to turn around and take a brief moment to talk about that a little bit. Starting in around 1961, 62, some of that ballpark area, the Supreme Court, let me backpedal a little bit. In the late 1800s, contraception was banned from anybody being able to use it in this country by law. Part of the common, let me see if I can call that up. Okay, we have banned in natural law, God's law in the area of human sexuality. We have turned sex into something of pleasure, using people for hedonistic purposes. We have disassociated the purpose that God intended for marriage and family and babies and the raising children. We have both mother and father, to have both mother and father, not a mother and a welfare check. Back in the 1940s, we didn't have schools teaching sex education. That's part of the thing that changed. We didn't have entertainment industry glorifying sex. The government policy and laws forbade the sale or promotion of contraception. That was part of the common stock law, if I'm remembering correctly. I got it somewhere, but it must not, I didn't include it as this message. That was back in the 1800s. And so that was still in effect up until 1960. Most churches still taught that up until 1930s that contraception was sin. Starting in the 1960s, this would all change, with most churches starting to approve of contraception. The Supreme Court in 1961 legalizing the use of contraception for marriage partners. That happened in 1961. That was the first major dent in how things, on how we started down this roller coaster road down the wrong direction. In 1971, the court would legalize the use of contraceptives for unmarried folks. Then in the late 1970s, the courts would make it legal for the government funding of contraceptives to minors. In 2001, the courts would declare and overturn all sodomy laws. In 2013, the courts first encroachment on the beginnings of the redefinition of marriage for the purpose of same-sex marriage. That's where we're headed. I want to go down one more point in here that's interesting. Is does anybody know what church was the first church to abandon that contraception was wrong? Anglican Church was the first church to do it back in the 1930s. Prior to that, every single Protestant church alongside of the Catholic Church taught that contraception was wrong even within the bonds of marriage. All your churches taught the same thing. England Church was the first one. When the Church of England turned around and dumped it, is this the article? Yes. It was at the Lambeth Conference in the 1930s when the Church of allowing contraceptive use. Now, 75 years later, the same church now approves of gay marriage and ordination of gay priest. The Washington Post, though, is very interesting. Back then, when the English Church overthrew contraception as morally wrong and responded in an article, stated, carried to its logical conclusion, the committee's report, if carried into effect, would sound the death kill of marriage as a holy institution by establishing degrading practices which would encourage indiscriminate immorality. The suggestion that the use of legalized contraceptives would be careful and restrained is preposterous. Anyone reading the Post today would consider this a forgery or the result of internet hacking, but such was once the majority of the opinion reflected by the paper. But little by little, almost all the Protestant denominations fell in line, and in many ways those predictions make the Post the secular Humani Vitae that predicted similar consequences by Pope Paul VI back in 1960. Very interesting that a secular paper came up with the same conclusions, that we were going to go downhill with the approval of contraception. And so that this particular lady goes through all those changes in laws we went down the line, and this is the reason why we're at. This particular priest, Humani Vitae, I think he's from New Hampshire or Massachusetts, one or the other, gave the most fantastic homily from the pulpit on Humani Vitae that I have ever, I've never heard one like that around here at all. There's been a few other priests I found on the internet, but nobody's done it any better. The best person who's ever I've seen presentation in writing was done by Archbishop Chapleau. But this guy does a marvelous job from the pulpit in 18 minutes and gets gets an ovation when he's done with it. If only the priest would do it as a whole around here. Archbishop Corleone, again, on a very good homily. This is a representation of Chapleau's homily at the last March for Life. Mother and daughter approve of middle school sexually explicit material being used in their sex education class. Mother Teresa and her pro-life message at the prayer breakfast back in the 1990s. Euthanasia, what's wrong with it? Very well done. Euthanasia, this is, does everybody know who he is? Sean O'Malley, Cardinal Sean O'Malley. In his presentation, this is a couple years ago, one of the March for Lives, he makes mention, and he says, a culture that accepts the idea of parents killing their offspring, i.e. abortion, will soon accept the idea of children killing their parents, i.e. euthanasia. Father Derek Zagowski does a good job with Theology of the Body, Why Same-Sex Marriage is Wrong. This is a homily again, 18 minutes, and does a very good job with it. Does anybody know where he's out of? La Crosse, Wisconsin. Too bad we don't have 1,000 more of these. Bible teaches that birth control is wrong. Getting involved with evangelization by Father John Howell. Father John Howell, does anybody know who he is? He's out of Indiana. Fantastic priest. He's got a whole web page loaded with YouTube videos. I took a couple of them and put them up on my page so I can use some of his stuff. Does anybody know who this is? Leah Mills, I believe it is. She gave, you know.
She was Veritas?
Huh?
She was Veritas?
No. She was 12 years old. This goes back about 5 years ago or so, and she gave the most fantastic speech in class. Her teacher did not want to give it. It was a competition speech on why abortion was wrong. Eventually the teacher, who was pro-choice, caved in and was so impressed with the speech, she became her biggest defender. She won an award for it, went to state competition because of this speech. Her parents put it up online. It went viral. It has over 1.5 million hits on this particular YouTube page for the abortion one. I uploaded the one that she did on euthanasia because I don't think I've ever heard anything done so well on euthanasia as what this 13-year-old kid did. It's just dynamite. What she did. She now has her own. She has her own YouTube page, and she's now 17 years old and is expanding out in her pro-life work. Fantastic work. Father John Howell. That's this one down here. He does an excellent job of explaining why chastity is important in protecting the marital bed, and this is given in a homily again. And does such a fantastic job of doing it. Well worth the time to spend some time watching this. Pam Stanzel is probably the best speaker or best promoter of abstinence education that there is out there. I don't know how much she's still doing today, but for sure for at least a 10-year period, she was speaking to over 500,000 kids a year, every year without fail. I would use her class, Sex Has a Price Tag, in my religious ed class, and and whenever I used a video in my class, and there was always two of them that I always used, without fail, it was dynamite. Every one of them all said, "This, everybody needs to see this. Everybody needs to hear her." Gave bookloads of information as far as what they learned. I got the biggest response out of them. Ben Franklin gives very few people are aware of this, but at the Constitutional Convention, he gave one of the most profound speeches on the reason why prayer is so important, that it's unreal. It could easily be a sermon heard from the pulpit and would outpace most priests out there as far as what they could do with it. He did a marvelous job. George Washington declared in his farewell address that religion and morality were absolutely indispensable supports for our government. In vain would a patriot work to subvert these. In vain would someone work to subvert these. He could not be a patriot of this country who would work to subvert those great pillars, those great truths. Those are all the individual videos I have loaded up, and then I have a whole mess of playlists that are loaded up that connect all over the internet on every single topic that's out there. I've got 5 minutes. The reason why we're having it at 10 o'clock is so that I could get him to videotape this. I wanted to get this taped because there's very little out there on the internet. I'll give you some stuff that's on the playlist. The playlists take you all over the place. The thing that's nice about this particular site is that nobody has ever done anything like what's put on here. I made all the connections to all the social culture issues, and I put everything all in one place. So you don't have to search for everything underneath the sun, Google everything, and go all over the place and consume all sorts of extra time. There's some good playlists. Always include a number of different videos. You can play one or more, and they take you all over the place and give you answers on all the stuff. One man, one woman. Earth is thousands of years old, not billions. Those are some of the arguments from scientific view showing why the Earth is thousands instead of billions. It's not 100%, but it gives you the arguments why the whole evolutionary school of thought is wrong. But I've got one here on hooking kids on sex. That's your tax dollars at work. I should maybe just open this up just so you can see what's all in here. The Humanist Religion, Planned Parenthood, what they're teaching. Rush Limbaugh talks about it. Laura Ingraham from her show talks about it. The sexualizing of our kids. This gives you some samples of what's going on in the government schools. Planned Parenthood promotes sadomasochism to sex. That's pretty far off the wall. But that gives you somehow just how bad some of these programs are that are in our schools. Euthanasia, a whole playlist on euthanasia, on pro-life. Abortion is the ultimate child abuse. Pam Stenzel in her talk, Sex Has a Price Tag. There's 3 different versions basically. This one, I personally like the one that she did back here. These are a number of homilies on chastity by different priests that are out there. I think Father Hollowell is the best one. Secular humanism, so you can understand secularism a little bit more and everything that they teach. The government's war on family, its assault on family. A number of different videos going down the line on how government is actually destroying family and all the things that go into it. The harm of pornography. Evolution versus God, number of topics on evolution versus God. Frog into Prince Ken Holbein. Cohabitation, why purity is important. This does a good mock-up as far as why cohabitation is wrong. Duck Dynasty, they're pro-life, pro-family, pro-chastity. Abortion, the ultimate child abuse, euthanasia. No exceptions for abortion, including rape and all the other problems go along with it. Abortion survivors, these are people who have survived abortion. Abortion attempt was made on them. Some of them come out black, burnt babies, that type of thing, but they managed to survive abortion. And what they have to say, the rape victims, one of the most profound statements that the babies who are born out of a rape or incest have to say, and they will say this without fail: are you willing to turn around and tell me, being a product of rape, that my life is not worth living, that I should have died, I should have been killed? Is my life any less valuable than any of yours out there? It makes a profound effect on people. Most people can't look someone in the eye and say, yeah, you should have died. You don't deserve to be alive. Ben Franklin, some of our Christian roots, that's the war on family. Modesty, why modesty is so important. This particular playlist is the best one by Pam Stenzel. This is very good by Jason Everett, talking about chastity. A whole playlist, 11 different videos, I believe, 11 different videos on this one. Homilies on contraception. I think above I got homilies on Humani Vitae above. Up here somewhere, I think. Yeah. Humani Vitae videos are up in there. Common Core, what's wrong with Common Core? Contraception, she's probably the premier talker or premier educator on why contraception is wrong. She's very fantastic on this. Some more stuff on our Christian heritage. The trilemma argument, I consider this very important. One of the things we're having trouble with is the whole idea. Not only are we not teaching the morality in the church, we're not teaching a defense for why the church teaches what it teaches. Most kids never learn or understand why what the church teaches is true, and we don't even teach a defense for just basic Christianity. Why do we believe Jesus Christ is God? Christianity and Catholic Church are the only churches that teach that Jesus Christ is God. Why do we believe that? Why don't the Jews believe that? What are they missing? Why don't the Muslims believe that? Why doesn't the Hindus or Buddhists believe that? Christianity is unique. We believe that God came down as man and man made God, Word incarnate. Why do we believe that? What's the basis for that? These are sound arguments laying out why that is true, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is why the Bible is true, and this is a Protestant. He just does a better job than what I've ever seen any Catholic do. And explain why we can trust and rely on the Bible, particularly the New Testament. Again, more stuff on evolution, creatures that defy evolution. I went through this in the evolutionist school of thought on creation versus evolution. The creatures that defy evolution is just, it'll blow your mind if you look at the giraffe one, look at the woodpecker one. Pro-Life, Miracle Life, Sherry Richards, this is Dr. Bernard Nadelson, some more stuff on secular humanism, pornography, and Silent No More. These are women who had abortion, and they're now speaking up on how they're hurting and what they all went through, and they make a great testimony for why abortion is so wrong. All this stuff ought to be shared and ought to be put out there. The other thing I wanted to turn around and I want to turn around and touch on a couple of things that can be done in the world out there as far as fighting this. One of the things we need to turn on and encourage priests and bishops, etc., to take an active stance, to turn around and start preaching on these issues, to give homilies, to put out writings on that in the bulletin, or sending home writings like Bishop Conley did to every single parishioner on abortion. I still look at my background of having been a fallen away Catholic, having come back, and while I was outside of the church, I bought into some of the humanistic arguments for abortion, and on my return back to on the way back, that got me going was what they were teaching our kids in the school. That got my goat. I became involved. I needed to have some answers. I went to a pregnancy help center that was called the Love Life Library that had all these videos out there on teaching chastity. And as long as I was down there, I thought I ought to find out what this abortion is all about. And I got two videos. One, the video by Dr. Bernard Nadelson showing a baby being aborted in the first trimester using suction, and another one, the ultrasound went into the womb to life by Sherry Richards, and she shows these videos of the baby literally jumping off the wall, doing somersaults, sticking his tongue out, sucking his thumb, and I literally had tears running down the side of my cheek watching these things, and wondering, how come nobody's ever talked about this? How come we have such censorship going on by our news media? This is the land of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and this is all hidden from everybody. And eventually I came to the conclusion, why aren't they talking about this from the pulpit? These are butcher shops. We are as barbaric as any nation has ever been to take these babies apart. We literally dismember them. We tear their arms off, their legs off, and crush their skulls. It is horrifying. How can we allow this as a nation? And if people knew this, I cannot believe most people would accept this. It's the fact that the church is so silent and the news media is keeping it underneath cover, that most people don't know what really is going on. They have no clue, they have no conception, no idea what they're approving. And if this was exposed, you would see abortion end overnight. This could have been stopped 30 years ago if the church would have been doing its job. We have the pro-life groups doing the fantastic job, but the church has failed to do its job. And we need to promote bishops and priests to turn around and educate people from the pews. We need to promote them to educate with writings in the bulletin. We need to promote them to write, to send letters home to the parents and parishioners and all this stuff. How else are you ever going to teach people and reach the most number of people? Education is key. Understanding what's going on and explaining it from the heart is key. Some other things that can be done. This is just one example, but I do this on a regular basis, and you can take some time to do this, anybody yourself. You got articles on all these subjects going on all the time, usually on the opposite end of the fence, but they're out there, and you can get on lists to receive some of these articles from Life News, Life Site News, etc. Let me just explain it. This takes too long. A lot of times they got articles all over the internet. Journals got articles on the internet. They got editorials. There are editorials on there. You can sign in and go in there, and you're allowed to comment. And you can turn around and put a comment to counteract what the article is saying. You can load a link onto with your arguments so that people can be educated, like a link from LifeSide News or Life News or anywhere else, to educate people who out there. It's one way to turn around and combat things that are going on, just by taking some time and go on the internet and answer some of those comments. It's a way to put your word out there. Another way is if you got a Facebook page. If you don't have a Facebook page, you probably should get one. because you can turn around and you can reach X number of people this way. You can load up articles. You can load up the YouTube videos. You can copy and paste YouTube videos into the thing. Some of these articles, I turn around and I load up one of my YouTube page, videos, or one of the YouTube page playlists. And in response, like on the Bishop Durkin one, I probably put in a one man, one woman video playlist in there where they can, and I tell them to open up in a new tab. That way they can see the full playlist very easily and pick and choose what they want to look at, and a number of different videos dealing with one man, one woman marriage that way. You can do so much that way on the internet by turning around and doing that. You can turn on and share stuff like that from Life News, Life Site News, which is some of the best, most pro-life, pro-chastity, pro-marriage articles that are out there come from Life News or Life Site News. You can pass those on through your Facebook page or through Twitter page. You can turn around and use, if you get Twitter account, you can do some of the same stuff there, just not quite as much because it has to be short. It has to be 180 characters, I think they allow you for Twitter. But I got 100 people on my Twitter account that I'm tied into. On my regular Facebook page, I've got 2,000 some friends. Took a while to get that, and I had to cheat a little bit to do it, but I got 2,000 some friends. And I've got a Chastity Facebook page, which deals with, and I've expanded it out to deal with all the pro-life issues and everything else. Then I've got 3,000 some people on there. Some of of those 3,000 people on the Chastity Facebook page, I've got 900 of them are my friends. And the rest are all different people than from my regular Facebook page. And so you can spend some time in there just putting out articles and putting things out to people. I've got an email list of about 60, 80 people between all the dioceses here in the state of Wisconsin that I email probably about 4 to 6 articles a week, somewhere on there. I may send out 2 to 4 in one day, and I may send out nothing for 3 or 4 days in a row. But usually there's something I can turn around and put out. Either something I'm constantly updating the YouTube page and adding videos and playlists to it. And so I throw those out every once in a while by email, and I throw those out onto the Facebook page. These are ways of educating people. If more people are doing some of the same stuff, and we're emailing the people in the diocese of Milwaukee or some of the other dioceses out there, we could maybe move some of these priests to take some action. The young people who are in school, if any of you young people are in school, you have the best opportunity to be able to turn on and take a stand and do something, because every single time, all these English classes at the high school level, you usually have 1 or 2 years where you're given speeches, and you have to make a presentation speech. You have to make what do they call the one where you have to convince somebody of something? Persuasion speech. And those are things where you could take the topic of pro-life and you could turn around and give a speech on that and present that to your class. And you got access to all sorts of material to help you prepare something like that for a short presentation, and you could potentially make a powerful impact on some of your friends out there. It's a way to reach more people. And you'll, as a high school student or a college student, you'll never have more opportunity to reach more people that are surrounding you than what you will then versus your adult life. The only way to reach a whole lot more people is via the internet, by the email system, by Facebook, by YouTube. You can make things grow where you can reach thousands and thousands of people. I would put out, when we were fighting for the Human Growth and Development to get the Absence-Centered program in place, we'd write articles and we'd get them published in the West Dallas Star or the West Dallas Enterprise, which are no longer out there anymore. But we had people turn on doing that on a regular basis. Now what I do on the internet, there's no comparison the number of people I reach on the internet versus what I'm reaching, but what I would reach through the West Dallas Star and the West Dallas Enterprise, or any of us could do. I'm not to say that I'm way up there. It'd be nice if I had 100,000 people who have hit on my YouTube page. That isn't there. But it's in the thousands, it's in the tens of thousands of people that are hitting on it, and it's always increasing. And by me floating it out, answering some of these articles on there, it reaches even more people, and so it continues to grow. I'm hoping one day maybe it might take off, that people might catch on. I took what I've got here. I took it down to one of the younger priests who, in Milwaukee area, I don't want to mention, well, maybe I should. Father John Burns, does anybody know who he is? I was told that he's supposed to be pretty good. I sat down with him for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, whatever. I showed him what I got on the YouTube page, and he was kind of surprised. And he said, "I says, you can use this." He says, "Yeah." And he says, and certainly he caught on. He understood right away that this was a whole lot easier going through something like this than having to do a Google search and looking for all this stuff all over the place. It was going to be a whole lot of. He saw that right away. And so hopefully he'll put some of this stuff to use. He knew who Father Nathan was, and so I was impressed with the short meeting. I hope something will happen. I hope some people will grab hold. The Archdiocese doesn't want to have anything to do with the YouTube page. The people who run it, their communication department doesn't want to do anything with it. Even the Nazareth Project says they can't do anything with it. Why or what goes through these people's head, I don't understand at all. All I know is something's really radically wrong inside the church as far as what's going on here. And the catechesis that's going on is just atrocious. That's like what Father Nathan did in explaining why homosexuality is wrong. He did it, for the most part, all through natural law. The laws of reason, the laws of nature, in explaining it, and avoided the religious aspect to it. And so if natural law is a good way of defending most all of your moral principles. And I'm probably not good enough to try and do that with every single thing. I could probably do that to a certain extent with some things, but I think that would be the answer to that. Will they listen to it? Not necessarily, because they still want to say, well, that's just your opinion and that type of thing. But what they want to spawn off as facts all too often are not necessarily facts neither. It's a fact that evolution is true. Well, I beg to differ. It depends upon how you view things, isn't it? It depends upon where your looking glasses are coming from, that type of thing. So I think you can argue those things, but there are always going to be people who are going to try to pawn it off as just opinion. There's always going to be the ones who don't want to look at it. But it still needs to be confronted. It still needs to be challenged, and that's part of what needs to happen out there. And there are not enough people out there willing to challenge. At any rate, any questions? I'll entertain anything. I think that about covers it all. That's it then. Thank you.